No limit. Poker, 5 cards, stats, 5 players.
There are movies that come and go, and then there are movies that change everything. 59 years ago, a film hit American theaters and left audiences stunned, not just by its story, but by the raw, bold performances of the people on that screen. Some of those actors went on to become the biggest names in Hollywood history. Others stepped back from the spotlight. And sadly, some are no longer with us. So today, we're looking back at the cast of Bonnie and Clyde and finding out where life took each of them in the 59 years since the film's release. Warren Beatty, Clyde Barrow. When Bonnie and Clyde was released in August 1967, Warren Beatty was already a recognizable face in Hollywood. He had broken through 6 years earlier with Splendor in the Grass in 1961, playing opposite Natalie Wood. But Bonnie and Clyde was something entirely different, and not just as a performance. Beatty produced the film himself, championing it at a time when studios were hesitant and the material was considered too daring. He was 29 years old when the project came together, and what resulted was a film that didn't just launch careers, it reshaped American cinema. Born on March 30th, 1937 in Richmond, Virginia, Beatty grew up in a family with deep ties to the arts. His older sister was none other than Shirley MacLaine, who was already a Hollywood star by the time Warren made his own mark. The two siblings would both go on to become defining figures of their generation. As Clyde Barrow, Beatty brought charm, vulnerability, and a restless energy to the role. The character was flawed, unpredictable, and magnetic, and audiences couldn't look away. The film earned 10 Academy Award nominations, and while Beatty wasn't among the acting nominees that year, his role as producer placed him at the center of one of Hollywood's most significant cultural moments. Through the 1970s, Beatty's career only grew. He starred in McCabe and Mrs. Miller, 1971, alongside Julie Christie, with whom he had a lengthy romantic relationship. He followed that with Shampoo, 1975, which he also co-wrote, and Heaven Can Wait, 1978, which earned him Oscar nominations for acting, writing, and directing simultaneously, a feat that had only been achieved by Orson Welles before him. Then came Reds in 1981, a sweeping historical epic he directed, produced, co-wrote, and starred in. That film won him the Academy Award for Best Director, cementing his place not just as a performer, but as a filmmaker with genuine vision. His personal life was never far from the public eye. He was linked to some of the most celebrated women in Hollywood over the years. In 1992, he married actress Annette Bening, and the couple went on to have 4 children together. It was a relationship that, by all accounts, endured and brought him a sense of stability he hadn't always had in earlier decades. His final film role came in Rules Don't Apply in 2016, which he also directed and co-wrote, a passion project set in the world of Howard Hughes that had been developing for years. It was perhaps a more personal film than critics recognized at the time, a story about obsession, power, and the price of ambition. In many ways, it felt like a summary of everything Beatty had spent his career exploring. In 2017, he and Faye Dunaway were brought back together on stage at the Academy Awards to present the Best Picture Award, a full half-century after Bonnie and Clyde had first brought them together. The evening took an unexpected turn when Beatty, handed the wrong envelope by a production error, read the name of the wrong film. The moment became one of the most discussed in Oscar history, though investigators later confirmed clearly that the mistake originated with the incorrect envelope from PricewaterhouseCoopers, not with Beatty himself. After that night, Beatty stepped away from public life almost entirely. As of 2026, he is 88 years old, and his appearances have been rare. He was last seen at a public event in 2022. His absence from his daughter Ella Beatty's Broadway debut in 2024 drew concern from fans and industry observers alike, with reports suggesting that his health has been declining in recent years. No official statements have been made, but those who knew the man who once stood at the center of Hollywood's greatest creative era can only hope that he is at peace in whatever quiet life he has chosen. Faye Dunaway, Bonnie Parker. If Warren Beatty was the engine of Bonnie and Clyde, Faye Dunaway was its soul. She was just 26 years old when she stepped into the role of Bonnie Parker, a young woman running headlong toward disaster with her eyes wide open. The performance earned her a nomination for the Academy Award for Best Actress, the first of 3 Oscar nominations she would receive over the course of her career. Born Dorothy Faye Dunaway on January 14, 1941, in Bascom, Florida, she grew up in a military family that moved frequently. She found her footing at Boston University, where she earned a degree in theater and made her way to New York, where she trained and performed before making the leap to film. Bonnie and Clyde announced her to the world in unmistakable terms. Critics and audiences alike recognized something exceptional in her, a combination of beauty, intelligence, and intensity that was rare even in that extraordinary era of American filmmaking. The film put her, as she later recalled, firmly in the ranks of actresses that would do work that was art. What followed was one of the most impressive runs any actress has ever had. The Thomas Crown Affair in 1968, Chinatown in 1974, The Towering Inferno in 1974, 3 Days of the Condor in 1975, and then Network in 1976, for which she won the Academy Award for Best Actress, playing Diana Christensen, a ruthless television executive whose obsession with ratings consumes everything around her. It remains one of the most praised performances in the history of American film. Dunaway also earned a Primetime Emmy Award in 1994 for her guest appearance in Columbo, adding another milestone to a collection of honors that includes 3 Golden Globe Awards and a BAFTA Award. Her personal life brought its share of highs and lows. She was married to musician Peter Wolf from 1974 to 1979, and then to photographer Terry O'Neill from 1983 to 1987. She adopted a son, Liam Dunaway O'Neill, in 1980, who has remained close to her in her later years. In her 2024 HBO documentary simply titled Faye, she revealed for the first time that she had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, offering context for some of the turbulent chapters of her career and drawing praise for her candor. She appeared at the 2024 Cannes Film Festival for the premiere of Mad Max Furiosa, looking effortlessly elegant, and on January 14, 2026, her 85th birthday, it was announced she had been cast in a new drama film titled Prima. Just days after that birthday, she made a striking and rare public appearance at the 2026 TCM Classic Film Festival in Hollywood, attending a special screening of Network at the TCL Chinese Theater. The audience gave her a warm reception, and for fans of classic cinema, seeing her walk back into the light felt like something long overdue. At 85, Faye Dunaway is still here, still Faye, still working, and still carrying with her the legacy of one of the greatest careers the screen has ever seen. Gene Hackman, Buck Barrow. Gene Hackman played Buck Barrow, Clyde's older brother, with a loose, easy warmth that made his character's eventual fate all the more heartbreaking. It was one of 5 performers from the film to receive an Oscar nomination that year, one of the most extraordinary collections of acting recognition ever assembled for a single picture. And Hackman's nomination for Best Supporting Actor was fully deserved. Born Eugene Allen Hackman on January 30th, 1930 in San Bernardino, California, He had a difficult childhood. His father abandoned the family when Gene was 13, and he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps at 16, lying about his age to do so. He didn't find his way to acting until his 30s, studying at the Pasadena Playhouse, where a fellow student named Dustin Hoffman was told, alongside Hackman, that neither of them was likely to make it in the business. What happened next disproved that entirely. Bonnie and Clyde was a turning point. His performance showed audiences a naturalistic, lived-in style that felt entirely different from the polished stars of earlier Hollywood. 4 years later, he won his first Academy Award for Best Actor for The French Connection, 1971, playing the relentless detective Jimmy Popeye Doyle. It was a performance of ferocious energy that remains a landmark of the crime genre. His second Oscar came in 1993 for Best Supporting Actor in Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, 1992, where he played the villainous Little Bill Daggett with terrifying authority. Between those two awards and beyond, he built one of the most enviable filmographies in Hollywood. The Conversation, 1974, Superman, 1978, Mississippi Burning, 1988, The Firm, 1993, Crimson Tide, 1995, The Royal Tenenbaums, 2001, and Runaway Jury, 2003, among dozens of others. In nearly every film he made, Hackman brought the same quality, a deep, grounded reality that made every character feel like a person who had lived a life before the camera ever found him. He had no vanity about it. He played heroes and villains, comic figures and tragic ones, and he made them all feel true. Directors who worked with him often said the same thing. He was the most prepared actor in the room and the most truthful. That combination made him one of the most sought-after performers of his generation for more than 4 decades. After Welcome to Mooseport in 2004, he retired from acting entirely. He and his wife, classical pianist Betsy Arakawa, settled in a quiet home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He painted, wrote novels, and lived as privately as anyone who had once been one of the most recognized faces on Earth could manage. He was last seen in public in March 2024. On February 26, 2025, both Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa were found dead at their Santa Fe home. Investigators determined that Arakawa had died first, on approximately February 11, 2025, from hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, a rare illness transmitted through contact with infected rodents. Hackman, who had been suffering from advanced Alzheimer's disease, is believed to have died around February 18, 2025, of hypertensive atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, with Alzheimer's listed as a contributing factor. He was 95 years old. There were no signs of foul play, and the tragedy unfolded in the privacy of the home he had shared with his wife. Gene Hackman was one of the finest actors of the 20th century. The industry mourned him deeply, and tributes poured in from across the film world. Clint Eastwood, who had directed him in 2 films, said simply, "There was no finer actor than Gene." That is a sentiment very difficult to argue with. Estelle Parsons, Blanche Barrow. Of the 5 actors from Bonnie and Clyde who received Oscar nominations, only one took home a trophy that night: Estelle Parsons, who won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her portrayal of Blanche Barrow, the nervous, shrieking wife of Buck Barrow. It was a performance that could easily have become shrill in lesser hands, but Parsons grounded Blanche in a genuine human fear that made the character's breakdown feel earned and devastating. Born Estelle Margaret Parsons. On November 20th, 1927, in Lynn, Massachusetts, she came to acting through an unusual path. She had studied law at Connecticut College, worked as a television writer and commentator on the Today program, and sang with a band before committing fully to the stage. She joined the Actors Studio in New York and established herself as a force in Broadway theater before transitioning to film. Her Oscar win for Bonnie and Clyde was followed almost immediately by a second nomination for Rachel in 1968, an extraordinary achievement in back-to-back years. She continued working in film and theater throughout the decades that followed. But perhaps her most widely recognized later role came on the long-running television series Roseanne, where she played Beverly Harris, the sharp-tongued, meddlesome mother of the main character. She returned to the role in the 2018 revival and continued through its spin-off series, The Connors, performing the role well into her 90s. Her personal life carried its own sorrows and joys. Her first marriage to author Richard Gehman produced twin daughters, Abby and Martha. Her second marriage to lawyer Peter Zimroth in 1983 lasted until his death in November 2021. She also adopted a son, Abraham, with Zimroth. Throughout all of this, she remained deeply committed to the stage. She became co-associate artistic director of the Actors Studio in New York, where she has mentored and guided artists for decades. She hikes, swims, does Pilates, and by her own account, has no intention of slowing down. Her approach to age has been refreshingly practical. "I never wanted to be famous," she once said. "I just wanted to be left alone. My image of myself was living all alone and having a driver." In February 2026, she was announced as the honoree at theater for the new city's annual Love and Courage Gala, a tribute to her extraordinary career and her contributions to the American theater. As of 2026, Estelle Parsons is 98 years old and still going. Michael J. Pollard, C.W. Moss. Michael J. Pollard played C.W. Moss, the fidgety, loyal, and ultimately treacherous young mechanic who throws in his lot with Bonnie and Clyde. It was a tricky role. C.W. is both endearing and complicit, and Pollard handled the balance with a loose, quirky charm that was entirely his own. The performance earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor and introduced him to a wide audience as a genuine acting talent. Born Michael John Pollock Jr. on May 30th, 1939, in Passaic, New Jersey, he had appeared on television throughout the early 1960s, including on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis and The Andy Griffith Show, where he played a cousin to Deputy Barney Fife. He also appeared in an early episode of Star Trek in 1966, but it was Bonnie and Clyde that placed him squarely in the spotlight. After the film, he worked steadily as a character actor for decades, accumulating nearly 100 film and television appearances. He was known for playing eccentric, offbeat figures, roles that suited his unmistakable presence. Among his later credits were Dirty Little Billy, 1972, Melvin and Howard, 1980, Roxanne, 1987, Tango and Cash, 1989, and Rob Zombie's cult horror film House of 1,000 Corpses, 2003. He never quite recaptured the attention he received for Bonnie and Clyde, but he kept working with consistency and dedication. In his later years, he was known among friends for walking everywhere he went and for his deep love of Turner Classic Movies, a fitting detail for a man whose own finest hour was part of that golden era of American cinema. Michael J. Pollard passed away on November 20th, 2019, at the age of 80. He died of cardiac arrest at Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles. Denver Pyle. Frank Hamer. Denver Pyle had been a fixture of American television and film for nearly 2 decades before Bonnie and Clyde came along. He played Texas Ranger Frank Hamer, the grim-faced lawman who dedicates himself to hunting down Bonnie and Clyde, and who, in one of the film's most memorable scenes, is captured and humiliated by the gang before being set free. It was a role that asked for a particular kind of dignified toughness, and Pyle delivered it exactly. Born Denver Del Pyle on May 11, 1920, in Bethune, Colorado, he served in the United States Navy during World War II and was wounded in action at the Battle of Guadalcanal. After the war, he found his way to acting through amateur theater and eventually made his screen debut in 1947. He built a long and reliable career in westerns and character roles throughout the 1950s and 1960s. After Bonnie and Clyde, he continued working prolifically in television. He played the recurring character Briscoe Darling Jr. on The Andy Griffith Show, a fan-favorite role that gave him some of his most memorable comedic moments on screen, and then played the lead in NBC's The Life and Times of Grizzly Adams in 1977. He became a genuine household name when he took on the role of Uncle Jesse Duke in The Dukes of Hazzard, which ran on CBS from 1979 to 1985 and featured him in 146 episodes. The show made him beloved by an entirely new generation of viewers, and he embraced that connection warmly. He was talented in ways beyond acting, too. He was an accomplished banjo player and a painter who spent his off hours on landscapes and nature scenes. He established Denver Pyle's Children's Charities, which raised significant funds for children's programming in Texas, and became involved with the Special Olympics. The Texas Senate honored him and his wife for that charitable work. It was a side of the man that his most devoted fans knew well, and that speaks to who he actually was beyond the roles. Denver Pyle received his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame on December 12, 1997, just 2 weeks before his death. He passed away on Christmas Day, December 25, 1997, from lung cancer. He was 77 years old. Dub Taylor, Ivan Moss. Dub Taylor played Ivan Moss, the scheming father of C.W., who ultimately betrays Bonnie and Clyde to law enforcement in the film's final act. One of the most quietly devastating moments in the picture. It was the kind of supporting role that Taylor had been playing with skill and authority for decades, and he brought exactly what the moment required. Born Walter Clarence Taylor, Jr. on February 26, 1907 in Richmond, Virginia, Taylor was one of Hollywood's great working character actors, the kind of dependable, versatile performer that every production was grateful to have. He began his career in vaudeville as a harmonica and xylophone player, a talent he later showcased on television shows and even on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. His film debut came in Frank Capra's You Can't Take It With You in 1938, and from there, he appeared in more than 200 films and television episodes across a career that spanned over 50 years. He was a familiar face in westerns, comedies, and everything in between. His television credits alone make for a remarkable list: I Love Lucy, The Twilight Zone, Gunsmoke, Bonanza, The Andy Griffith Show, Little House on the Prairie, The Cosby Show, and Designing Women, among many others. His son, Buck Taylor, also became an actor, and the two appeared together in the 1991 television film Conager. There was something deeply American about Dub Taylor, a working man of the entertainment industry who showed up, did the job, and did it well, decade after decade, without any apparent need for the spotlight. Hollywood has always needed people like that, and they are not always recognized the way they deserve to be. Dub Taylor died of a heart attack on October 3, 1994 in Los Angeles, California. He was 87 years old. His ashes were scattered near Westlake Village, California. Gene Wilder, Eugene Grizzard. Gene Wilder had one scene in Bonnie and Clyde, a brief, funny, and ultimately terrifying sequence in which his character, A young undertaker named Eugene Grizzard and his girlfriend are taken hostage by the gang during a joyride. The scene shifts in tone in an instant when Clyde casually asks what Eugene does for a living, and the answer visibly unnerves even the criminals. It was Gene Wilder's first film appearance, and it was unforgettable. Born Jerome Silberman on June 11, 1933 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Wilder had trained at the Old Vic in Bristol and studied under Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio in New York before making his way to Hollywood. That tiny role in Bonnie and Clyde was just the beginning. The very next year, he starred in Mel Brooks's The Producers, 1968, as the anxious accountant Leo Bloom, earning his first Oscar nomination and beginning one of cinema's most celebrated comedic partnerships. What followed was an extraordinary run. He played the Waco Kid in Blazing Saddles, 1974, Frederick Frankenstein in Young Frankenstein, 1974, which he also co-wrote, and of course the enigmatic, whimsical Willy Wonka in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, 1971, a performance that became one of the most beloved in the history of children's cinema. His personal life carried deep sorrow alongside his professional joys. In 1984, he married comedian and Saturday Night Live star Gilda Radner, and the two were deeply devoted to each other. Radner was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 1986 and died in 1989. Wilder was devastated, and he channeled his grief into action, co-founding Gilda's Club, a cancer support community, and helping establish the Gilda Radner Ovarian Cancer Detection Center in Los Angeles. He later married Karen Boyer, who remained with him until the end of his life. He retired from acting after a guest role on Will and Grace in 2003, for which he won a Primetime Emmy Award. In his later years, he wrote novels and memoirs and painted. He had been privately battling Alzheimer's disease for 3 years before his death, keeping the diagnosis secret so that children who loved Willy Wonka would never have to see him struggling. Gene Wilder died on August 29, 2016, at his home in Stamford, Connecticut, from complications of Alzheimer's disease. He was 83 years old. When he passed, a recording of Ella Fitzgerald singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow was playing, a detail offered by his nephew, and one that feels entirely right. Evans, Velma Davis. Evans appeared in Bonnie and Clyde as Velma Davis, the girlfriend of Gene Wilder's character Eugene Grizzard, caught up in the terrifying joyride alongside him. It was a small but memorable role in a film full of them. Born Evans White Greenstreet on November 26, 1932, in Bluefield, West Virginia, she worked steadily in television throughout the 1960s, appearing in The Twilight Zone, Gunsmoke, and Alfred Hitchcock Presents, among other series. Her work in film was more limited, with Bonnie and Clyde standing as her most high-profile screen appearance. She married director John Frankenheimer on December 13, 1963, a marriage that lasted nearly 40 years until his death on July 6, 2002. They had no children together. After the loss of her husband, she largely stepped away from public life. Evans passed away on June 16, 2024, in Sherman Oaks, California. She was 91 years old. Director Arthur Penn. A final note. No look back at Bonnie and Clyde would be complete without acknowledging the man behind the camera. Arthur Penn directed the film with a fierce, instinctive intelligence that balanced comedy and carnage, tenderness and brutality in ways that no one had attempted before in American cinema. He had previously directed The Miracle Worker on Broadway and on film, and Mickey won, but Bonnie and Clyde was the work that defined his legacy. Penn went on to direct Alice's Restaurant, 1969, and Little Big Man, 1970, among others. and remained a significant figure in American theater and film for decades. He passed away on September 28, 2010, at the age of 88. The film he made in 1967 did not just tell a story. It changed the rules of what stories could be told and how. Every actor who stepped in front of his camera that year was part of something that the world had never quite seen before and hasn't quite seen since. 59 years ago, a film came out that nobody quite expected to matter the way it did. The people who made it, the actors, the director, the producers, were working at the edge of what was acceptable, pushing against the conventions of an industry that was still figuring out what it wanted to be. What they created together became a landmark of American cinema. Some of those people went on to extraordinary careers. Some lived long, full lives away from the spotlight. Some are no longer with us. The film cost relatively little to make and was not expected by the studio to perform well. It went on to become one of the highest-grossing films of 1967 and, by 1968, the second highest-grossing film Warner Brothers had ever released. More than that, it opened a door. The directors, writers, and performers who came after, who made up what became known as the New Hollywood era, were working with the confidence that Bonnie and Clyde had given them, that a film could be violent and funny, that criminals could be sympathetic, that the audience could be trusted to sit with moral complexity and not demand easy answers. Every cast member in this film contributed something essential to that achievement, the stars and the supporting players alike, the famous faces and the smaller roles. Each one of them was present at a moment when American cinema shifted, and what they did on that screen still resonates today. If you enjoyed this look back at the cast of Bonnie and Clyde, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps us keep bringing you these stories about the films and the people that shape the world of cinema. We'll see you in the next one.